Rescue hooks to rescue, Mayday! Get ahead, West. Bad Mayday, what's your location? Get the hell out of here, hurry up! We need radio silence, baby. Water in that 2.5-inch line. 48 inch water in a 2.5-inch line. To the rope, to the rope. 35 in the rear, 35 in the rear.
Welcome to the Emergency Traffic Podcast. Hello there, and welcome back to the Emergency Traffic Podcast. Thank you for joining us as we continue to explore and discuss firefighter line of duty death incidents. This is Season 4, Episode number 67, where we will go back to Baltimore, Maryland, where a probationary firefighter died during live fire training at an acquired structure in 2007. We were in Baltimore back in February of 2023 for episodes 25 and 26 of Season 2 for the Stricker Street fire that killed 3 members of the Baltimore Fire Department in January of 2022. Unfortunately, the Baltimore Fire Department is no stranger to line of duty deaths. They lost 6 members in 1955 when a hardware store collapsed, another in 1985 from the backdraft of a row house, another in 2014 when an incident safety officer fell through a hole in the floor of a vacant row house, and one more 2 years ago in October of 2023 in another vacant building. We learned from the 2022 multiple line of duty deaths in Baltimore that Baltimore, like any other metropolitan areas in North America, suffers from vast numbers of vacant buildings, poverty, and extremely tight fire department budgets to protect the community. These are all contributing factors to these tragic events. Please join Doug, Denny, and I as we learn about this incident. I'll bring the guys in now. Well, hello, Doug and Denny. How are you guys today?
Marvy.
Enjoying February.
No.
What's new in Nova Scotia there, Denny?
Well, just a lot of white stuff and a lot of western-like temperatures. So, although I guess you're getting Arctic-like temperatures, so I'm not offering to trade, that's for sure.
It's been cold here in Alberta for weeks. I missed 2 weeks of it or 3 weeks of it, which is good, but it's still cold.
You should be down here on electric heat. Ouch.
Oh, yeah. Well, but it's green, right? Because it all comes from hydro or what?
No. Most of it's thermal.
Thermal. Oh, you have a heat
Coal,
pump, right?
oil, gas.
Oil, that's right. Saudi Arabian oil. Okay, we won't go there. We'll get too much into politics.
Yeah, let's not go there. I went on a big rant in a group chat the other day about it. I felt proud of myself, but I don't know if I made any friends.
Yeah, I got into it the other day with a person works for the provincial government, friend of mine, liberal guy, and we went on and on for quite a while, but it was good. And Doug, how are you in Alberta? You're cold.
Yeah, well, it's cold outside. It's not so cold inside, but I'm good. Just living the dream of being a dad and being a fireman. It's like go to work, come home, do dad duty, go to sleep, repeat, Finally got some time to come on here. I missed a few episodes. I'm sure you missed me.
Yeah.
So it's nice to be back for one.
Excellent. That's good.
Everything went smoothly. It was good.
That's because Paul didn't have anybody to call him out on his BS. It all just flows.
Ooh, ouch.
Ooh, ouch.
Okay. Well, on that note, let's continue with the episode. So, first of all, we have tips from training and safety from the FDNY. Dirk or Doug put us onto this book of training tips that they've put out, which is great. Tip number 3 of 2024, bunker gear, dermal absorption, and off-gassing. The importance of removing your bunker gear immediately after a fire and then sending it out for decontamination cannot be understated. Firefighters are exposed to a complex mixture of combustion products from fires. These include polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which are known as PAHSs, and volatile organic compounds, or VOCs. Consider the following points. A research study provides strong evidence that PAHs are absorbed through the skin during firefighting operations. PAHs are a group of hundreds of different chemicals formed by burning organic material. Sweat glands open up when you exert yourselves, and in a contaminated environment, this allows toxins to readily enter the body. The study also suggests that volatile organic compounds also enter the human body during and after firefighting operations. These contaminants cling to your gear and skin. Bunker gear can off-gas for hours after a fire. Firefighters may breathe in the toxins that off-gas from contaminated bunker gear. Many PAHs and VOCs are linked to coronary heart disease and several cancers. Protect yourself from cancer-causing toxins and clean your gear. Any thoughts on that, you guys?
I don't have any thoughts. I agree. If you go to a fire, then clean your gear.
Yeah, I saw Saskatoon has a first stage decon trailer that they tow to fires.
Yeah, they
So
had
like a
some
big,
stupid name for it. I saw that picture too. It was
yeah,
they could
cargo
have just
trailer.
put decon on it, but it's some early warning washing, some dumb name I
Early
saw.
decontamination unit. I guess it's so they can have a warm place to tear down and put on some coveralls.
Yeah, it's a
and
good
stuff.
idea. Just a dumb
So
name.
I think firefighters need to understand that there's, three ways that they can be contaminated, right? You can be contaminated by touching something, so through contact. You can be contaminated through ingesting something by eating it, and you can be contaminated through inhalation, right? Through breathing it in. And of those three ways, breathing it in is by far the worst because it gets in intimate contact with the inside of your body. A lot if you ingest it. So, for instance, if you got soot and stuff on your hands and you happen to eat that, it'll probably pass right through you, right? But if it's in contact with the skin, it'll go transdermal, it'll spread into your bloodstream. But if you breathe it in, it's much quicker that it's absorbed. So firefighters tend to forget that, like even getting out of your contaminated gear, you can create dust, you can create, aerosols that you're breathing in and so forth. And those are a lot more dangerous. So I think they're looking at now, which position on the fire ground. And I was just listening to this Bay Area podcast, and they were talking about PAHs and which firefighter is getting the most exposed, and in some cases it's the guy who's running the engine. Right, he's standing outside. He's not geared up. He's not wearing breathing apparatus or anything like that, so he could be exposed to the smoke and be breathing it in, and could be the guy that's least protected. So you got to think about all of those things.
Take your jacket and gloves and stuff off while you're still on air, so you don't get you're not aerating all that dust and soot into your breathing.
Yeah, or really holding your breath.
Yeah. Okay. Current events. Well, it's been a busy season in the fire world. Of course, last week we had a commuter train in Delaware County that caught fire just outside of a station. I believe part of it was in a station and part of it was out. And I guess the rate that it burned was fantastic. Like it really went up fast. And they ended up with, evacuating people and defensive conditions.
And it was elevated too, eh?
Right. Yeah. Off the ground.
Yeah.
So very, very difficult fire to deal with and to get the people evacuated safely.
Yeah. And to do your primaries, imagine that.
Yeah. How the heck do you do that?
Quickly.
Quickly with great difficulty. Yeah. We don't have any elevated trains in Western Canada except in Vancouver, I guess.
There's a portion of Edmonton's and I think a portion of Calgary's that's elevated.
Yeah, actually, I think you're right. Absolutely. Yep.
Any bridge, man, any subway where the train runs across the road above the road, that's elevated.
Yep.
And you know about Mr. Murphy, right?
Yeah.
Murphy's
he
Law.
lives there. He's going to be there when you need him.
It breaks down and catches fire up the embankment. Of course it does.
Of course it does. Yep. California, Governor Newsom has issued a new executive order. Executive orders are popular these days, but anyway, this particular one, is to enforce the FireWise or FireSmart, depending on your country, zero zone around structures in high wildland urban interface risk areas. Cal Fire is actually developing maps for all these areas, and in those areas, they're going to be able to enforce that you haven't cleaned up around your house, your shrubs, your bushes, your wood pile, your junk, your fences, all that kind of stuff. They're trying to, of course, these were big factors in the Palisades fire, which led, and the other fires in the area a month ago. And so they're trying to get a handle on this. This was already a mandate in California, but they're going to add some enforcement teeth to it.
Yeah. So, I mean, like we discussed last time about, urban conflagrations, right? If you've got houses along the boundaries in the wildland urban interface, and they're part of a built up community, and they're the ones that are on the front line with the wildland urban, and they catch fire because they haven't done fire smart or firewise adequately. Their house on fire could burn down your house. So, in fact, it's not just them that's at risk. So, standing there going, well, I made a decision that I don't care about my house. It's not about that anymore, because now they've shown that if you lose your house, your neighbor might lose his house also.
Interesting comment about now they've shown. So actually, I found a post the other day that came back from the 60s after the 1961 Beverly Hills fire or wherever fires that they had down there. And they'd written a report that read the same thing, that we need to reduce our congestion and stop the fire breaks and all this kind of stuff. And obviously we haven't been successful. So we continue to live through this. And I just heard actually today that Team Rubicon, who I'm a member of, might be getting a project up in an Alberta community to go in now. They're getting a grant from the Red Cross to go in now and to fire smart a bunch of homes and areas ahead of time, to help provide some mitigation, which is interesting. We need to be proactive, and in fact, in California, they'll pay you to harden your home. They have a fund through Cal Fire and OES to harden your home and to clean your yard up and stuff like that. And I told my friends at AEMA we need to do that here.
Yeah, but collectively, we have a very short attention span.
Yeah,
I'm
right.
not sure I believe that you have friends at AEMA.
Okay, well, acquaintances. Sorry, nice one. See, Doug's back. Yay.
Colleagues.
colleagues.
People you know. Yeah.
People you know. That's right. Chicago continuing to struggle with maintaining rigs. Many municipalities are also struggling with the high cost of new rigs and long wait times. And actually, we saw a letter here today. The Pierce dealer in Alberta put out a letter to the public saying that they've got 150 rigs on order in Western Canada, Pierce rigs, that if there's a tariff that's implemented, of course, the munis would have to add that to the cost of the rigs. And so it's getting crazy here. Even parts are getting to be difficult to obtain. We can't staff them. We can't staff enough to maintain all the rigs. It's becoming a big problem.
Well, this isn't a Chicago problem. Chicago is
It's
just
everywhere.
very vocal about it on social media. I think it's an unofficial Chicago page that complains about their rigs a lot, but it's everywhere. And it's I think one of the biggest problems is the long wait times. Like, administrations of cities don't work 5 years out, right? They're not buying you a truck today for 5 years from now.
We're getting
so
beyond
it makes
the reach.
It makes it really hard. Like, I know one
Some
department
are,
is
but some are
talking
not.
with, like, they want to expand stations. They want to add stations to their city. And they're like, well, we got to buy the trucks now so that when the station opens, the truck's here. And never mind if you get in an accident or something breaks or like whatever, it's a problem. And then the cost of it and the Canadian dollar affects everybody. And I know a department that ordered some rescues that were like $400,000 more than the last order per truck, only because of the dollar and the cost of things. It's insane.
Yeah.
And there's been a thing going on Facebook. I've seen it from a few different pages about how one of the big problems is that all the fire truck manufacturers are being bought up by the same 2-3 companies. And even when you have multiple bids on a truck, at the end of the day, it's only one company bidding under 3 different names. And that's making it hard. And the problem with it is, like, they buy up 7 companies and they close 5 of the plants and they do everything out of the other 2. And it just makes everything take longer.
Yeah, I'm sure that is a factor. I think there's a business opportunity here for refurbing older trucks. I really think there is, and maybe not for frontline fire departments, but certainly for people who can't afford to spend. Well, now they're up 1.5 million for a pumper, and it's going to be 2 million in 2 years. And every 15 years you're going to drop 2 million on a pumper. I don't think so. Even the bigger cities are not going to be able to afford that pretty soon. So they're going to and I've said this before, it's not pumpers that put out fires, it's the firefighters that put out the fires. And so people are going to seriously start thinking about how many vehicles they keep in reserve, what condition those reserve vehicles are in, how they maintain their frontline fleet, how they staff their frontline fleet, and the capabilities. And I'm not talking about putting everything on the truck from soup to nuts, including the bar sink. They need to really start thinking hard about what you actually need, not those 1 in 1,000 call things you got to have that reach pull for. We just need to have a total rethink.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, the trucks, part of the whole maintenance issue is the trucks are becoming so complex. There's so many interdependent systems to make them work and to function effectively and be efficient and all this kind of stuff. And you get all these interdependent things that are working together. It's real bear to maintain. One thing goes wrong, and then you can't get parts and you can't fix them. And so
The problem, though, is all of these problems that we've just talked about are not fire department problems. They're all way beyond our control. Other than maybe the odd spec change a little bit, but you're not changing much. Like it's, I don't know what the answer is other than fire chiefs have to dig in and tell council why they need $2 million when last time they needed $1.5 million. Maybe you don't build that bike lane.
The council's answer is going to be, I need 5 pumpers, and they're going to say, you get 4.
Yeah.
That's what council's answer is going to be, because they've got, I know you don't believe that they plan in advance. Capital budgeting or capital funding is planned years in advance, and there's a certain amount of space that's there, and they have debt ceilings that the province puts on municipalities, but most municipalities that I know, they don't spend anywhere near their debt ceiling because they don't want to service the debt that high.
That's
and
right,
the public doesn't want to see it either. So they're self-imposed. So, do you buy a snowplow? Do you buy a school bus? Do you buy a fire truck? So you buy 1 fire truck, that means you don't buy 3 snowplows. That's what it means. And so, they have those decisions that they have to make on a regular basis. And honestly, I think the answer is going to be, you don't get 5, you get 4.
Yeah, don't say that too loud, Denny, because you say that too loud in front of a politician, they're going to buy the fire truck and put a snowplow on the front.
Hey, that happens. Garbage trucks out in New York City with snowplows on them.
New York City,
there's a video going
snow 3 times a year. That's different.
Yeah, there's a video going around of an ex-New York fire truck with a plow on it. So
yeah, snowflake.
That's the one.
The other thing,
I think there's a number of connotations there.
The other thing that's going on in the world is we continue to see lithium-ion battery fires, and we've had some school bus. I think we talked about last week or last episode, and this week. This episode, actually, 2 battery storage building fires. There was one in Gdansk, Poland, where there was a whole bunch of e-bikes involved that were parked in a historic building along with a bunch of battery storage packs, and it caught fire and burned to the ground. And one in Melbourne, Australia, that happened just a couple of days ago. Same thing. It was a whole bunch of batteries. I don't know why they were warehoused there, and they caught fire and burned to the ground. So we're like, another and another and another, and until we get a handle on these fires and how to store them, how to put them out, we're in trouble.
They're going to start storing that stuff like nuclear waste underwater.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no kidding. I've seen more departments using the blanket thing on cars. I've seen a few more posts of that, so that might start to be more common. Okay, well, let's get to the episode. This is a tragic episode that has all of us. Again, it's a training episode, so line of duty death during training, which should never happen. It gets all of our backs up a little bit when we discover these, and that's why we talk about them, to hopefully prevent them from happening again. On February 9th of 2007, a 29-year-old career probationary firefighter, female, died while participating in a live fire training evolution at an acquired structure. The information for this review was obtained from the NIOSH report 2007-09. The fire department, very large fire department, metropolitan fire department in the United States, in Maryland. The career department consists of 1,700 uniformed firefighters, 40 fire stations that serve a population of about 636,000 people in a geographic area of approximately 81 square miles. The fire department did not provide any documentation on any comprehensive evaluation process for promoting officers to ranks of increased responsibilities. Every officer and firefighter interviewed stated that the fire department did not have a set policy regarding promotions. Prior to October of 2006, the fire department's organized structure had the safety battalion reporting through the maintenance section under administration. After October 2006 and up to the fatal training incident, the safety battalion reported to the fire marshal section under the administrative division. At the time of this incident, the safety battalion consisted of one chief safety officer, one safety officer per shift, and one or two more safety officers on day shift. There was not a requirement for a safety officer from the safety battalion to oversee any live fire training events. Recruits who graduated from the training academy were trained to the requirements of NFPA 1001, Standard for Professional Qualifications, firefighter level 1 and 2. Because of a shortage of state-certified instructors and the lack of resources to pay the existing state-certified instructors overtime, the department had advertised for full-time firefighters to act as adjunct instructors and assist with recruit training. In return, these instructors would be compensated with time off in lieu for the time they assisted with training. The burn building at the training academy was condemned at the time of the NIOSH investigation. There was also a mobile live fire trailer at the academy, but that was not used. The size and safety features of the mobile live fire training trailer limited the number of recruits that could be trained in a single evolution. This did not meet the needs of the department. As part of the investigation, NIOSH reviewed a video that showed NFPA 1403 standard for live fire training evolutions that was not followed during the previous live fire training evolution.
So we're going to talk about the physical entry standards for firefighter recruit candidates, which I think the department actually called them cadets. I want to remind you that this event actually happened in 2007, and certainly there was lots of standards, that existed before then, but it is a while ago. So the fire department at the time did not have any physical fitness requirements. The fire department did not have a selection criteria, such as a candidate physical abilities test program, the CPAT, which had been developed by the IAFF, International Association of Firefighters, and the International Association of Fire Chiefs, where they had this joint labor management wellness fitness initiative, which dates, by the way, to 1997 that it was done. I think it was adopted in 98, something like that. A lot of fire departments took it on. To ensure, and they did not have that, to ensure that recruits were physically able to safely and effectively complete the critical tasks associated with firefighting. For those of you who are not familiar with CPAT does standardized simulations of firefighter tasks, and it's a pass-fail. There's time limits, and like you get one retry, something like that, and then you fail, and if you fail, you're gone, basically. Anyway, during the post-incident investigation, all of the fire department officers that were interviewed stated that the city had removed physical fitness requirements after a change of administration several years prior to the incident, in an attempt to recruit a more diversified workforce. The fire department subsequently developed a physical abilities test of their own to evaluate prospective recruits on the time to complete specific firefighting tasks, but the test was not developed using national consensus standards like CPAT. Although the fire department developed a test, the recruit could still continue on afterwards to become a firefighter, even though they did not meet the time requirements for the test.
It was reported to NIOSH that investigators that the fire department relied on self-elimination of recruits as the only means of screening candidates. Information provided during multiple interviews suggests that the environment of the training academy was to pressure the less qualified recruits to drop out.
So a little bit about a training experience of the people involved. The victim was a probationary firefighter who had not yet completed the last requirements to achieve her NFPA 1001 standard for firefighter professional qualification level 1. And the last requirement at this time was live fire training. She reportedly had previously experienced mass claustrophobia while wearing a face piece, and this occurred during previous training evolutions. It was also reported that the victim did not meet the minimum required time to complete the physical abilities test that had been developed by the fire department when she was hired. She reportedly had been retested just prior to the incident and produced a slower time than she had in the initial test. Documentation was not provided to the investigative team regarding her physical ability testing, in other words, how she did. The operator in charge of this incident was a lieutenant who had received training through the State Fire and Rescue Institute on topics such as Instructor 1 and 2 and fire skills for instructors. He had at the time over 25 years of firefighting experience. The safety officer, which I think was the chief safety officer, was a district chief who was in charge of the training academy. He had received training through the State Fire and Rescue Institute on topics such as leadership and supervision, fire command, and methods of instructor level 2, teaching and program development techniques. He had over 20 years of firefighting experience. None of the adjunct instructors, in other words, the helper instructors, that had participated in this training evolution had any training as a fire instructor. The adjunct instructor for the victim squad had over 9 years of firefighting experience. This was the first time he had acted as a training instructor.
So a little bit about the personal protective gear, or PPE. The protective ensemble, which is the PPE that was used at the training academy, was equipment that had been removed from service as newer equipment became available to full-time firefighters in the field. Self-contained breathing apparatus, flashlights, radios, and other safety equipment were provided on an as-needed basis. Through interviews, it was noted that some of the participants did not have pass devices and that there were not enough radios for all of the instructors associated with the training. The turnout gear that was worn by the victim was sent by the department to the manufacturer for inspection. The NIOSH investigative team noted that there were little to no signs of heat exposure on either the coat or the pants. The coat was manufactured in 2002 and was reported by the manufacturer to still be in serviceable condition, but requiring extensive cleaning. The pants were manufactured in 1997. The manufacturer reported the pants shell and liner were beyond their useful life and they should have been retired. The manufacturer reported that the thermal protection and moisture integrity was diminished due to abrasion and wear, especially in the crotch area of the pant. The structure they were training in was acquired for their live fire training, which was a 3-story end unit townhouse of ordinary construction that came to a 45-degree angle at the Alpha Delta corner. It had 3 bedrooms, approximately 1,200 square feet of living area. The building was designated a vacant structure by the city in June of 1999 and was condemned in January of 2004. Several weeks prior to the day of the incident, the structure had been used to practice forcible entry and ventilation operations. Portions of the walls and ceiling had been removed from the structure during those exercises. The first and second floors were approximately 44 feet long by 11 feet wide. The first floor consisted of a kitchen and a central staircase separating the front and a rear room. On the second floor, a bathroom and the staircase separated a rear and front bedroom. The third floor was above only the front portion of the townhouse. It had a front bedroom and a hallway that led to the stairs. The landing at the top of the stairs to the third floor contained a window on the Charlie side wall. The window was approximately 3 foot 5 inches above the floor and 2 foot 3 inches wide.
This, the whole, and it's an elephant in the room here, the diversity and inclusively policies and stuff, which I agree with. We need to build a more diverse workforce that represents the population, but we also have to be able to do the job. They got to be able to do the job. And if you're changing the testing and everything to allow people to pass it, if the testing is realistic, you have to question that.
Yeah, I think a willingness to do the job, as in an eagerness to do the job and a determination to do the job, is not enough. I mean, I think that's essential components and is really important. But beyond that, you've got to be able to do the job. I mean, you got to be able to rescue yourself. You got to be able to rescue your team members. You got to be able to rescue the public that you're with. You've got to be able to do the job on all accounts. And you're going to see later on in here that the firefighter who was the victim certainly certainly showed willingness to do the job, but there were possibly some issues with capability.
I'm willing to be an astronaut.
Yeah,
Can I go get on a space
Right.
shuttle or a rocket? No, I have to pass tests to be
Yeah.
there.
Physical and mental and everything else. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm willing to build fire trucks. You want to ride in the fire truck that I figured out how to build? Probably
I've seen you
not.
work on a car. Probably not.
Oh,
Okay.
Fair enough.
Uh,
Paul wants to be a fire chief. Do you want to be in his fire
oh,
department?
ouch. Slam. Probably not. Okay. Well, let's see. The building in question, Denis wrote up a nice little 360 here for us. It was a 3-story, ordinary brick construction, likely masonry with timber interior and framing. The third floor was only half as deep as the first 2 floors. The Alpha side had 1 entry door and a window on the first floor, 3 windows on the second and third floors. The Bravo side was a shared wall with row houses, no access, no openings. The Charlie side had a single-use door and a single window on the first floor. Second and third floors had a single window each. The third floor opened onto a second floor roof. The Delta side had a single window on each floor, fairly close but not aligned with the interior stairways. The fire locations and fuel loads, because remember, this is a live fire training event. So through interviews, it was determined that at least 12 wooden pallets, 11 bales of Excelsior. I did have to look that up to be sure what it was. Excelsior is a thin aspen wood shavings used in insulation, packaging, and firefighter training, and several other applications. So Excelsior and miscellaneous trash from the structure were used to light the fires in either a teepee or a lean-to configuration with the pallets. The teepee arrangement consisted of a pallet flat on the floor with 2 others on top leaning into the center supporting another. The bale of Excelsior was placed in the void area. The lean-to consisted of a pallet leaning against a wall with a bale of Excelsior underneath. During the site walkthrough and corroborated by interviews, it appeared that 9 fires were set in the acquired structure. There was 1 in the rear living room on the first floor, which consisted of an automotive tire, several mattresses, a foam rubber chair, a tree branch, and other debris that may be found in an abandoned residential structure. The teepee configuration fires were set on the second floor, front and rear bedrooms, and the third floor front bedroom. Lean-to fires were set in the closets of 3 bedrooms. There were also fires set in both the bathroom and the hall closet on the second floor, using approximately 1 bale of Excelsior. None of the instructors or firefighters that were interviewed reported knowledge of the fire that was set on the first floor.
so in other words, there were fires on all 3 floors, front and back and middle of each floor, with the exception of the ground floor, where there was only a major fire in the back.
Yeah, so I mean, this is crazy.
Not really realistic training. I
Not
don't
realistic.
think,
Yeah. Through the interviews and during a walkthrough, it was noted that Excelsior was also stuffed into wall and ceiling openings, ductwork vents, and behind drywall where it existed or was accessible. Denis fallen off his chair here now. It's like this.
Plus, the ceilings and walls were opened up.
I know. It's going to go crazy.
So you had
right
exposed
away.
Structure. Yeah.
Exposed, dry, old structure. Yep. With questionable integrity. The weather conditions were clear, with the temperature averaging 26 degrees Fahrenheit. The wind was between 13 and 25 miles per hour, with gusts up to 35 miles per hour. So that's 60-some kph per hour from the northwest. And the report doesn't really
So that's parallel to the Alpha side. Hey, Paul, that direction is parallel to the Alpha side, so it's like down the street, if you will.
Right, yeah. So they don't really talk a lot about wind. Now, this is 07, so wind, we weren't really talking a lot about wind and fires in those days and the wind effect. We're much more knowledgeable about it now. Obviously, it probably had an impact on this event, especially with all that fuel scattered throughout the building that wasn't sealed in any way, right, properly, because it was all had been ventilated.
But we will find out later that there was fire under pressure moving in that building.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I was wondering what was driving that.
Mm-hmm. So the people that we had involved here, so we had training engines, which were the students, and there was 3 training engines, and each training engine consisted of an adjunct instructor and 3 firefighters. So there's 3 of those with 3 firefighters on each that were all trainees or all students. And then there was a training trucks. There was 3 training trucks, so an aerial basically, and they also contained an adjunct instructor and 3 or 4 firefighters for each truck. There was a medic with 2 medics in it. They weren't involved in the training. They were there just in case. There was an instructor in charge, which was a lieutenant, and he was the safety officer academy director. So their training academy director who was operating as safety officer. There was also an ignition officer, which were 2 instructors. And then there was an actual in-service battalion. There was a battalion chief, pump operator, and a engine 14, which was operational, and then truck 10, which was also operational, and they each had an officer and 3 firefighters.
So a fair number of people there actually, but a lot of students, right?
Big student ratio.
Yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit about the investigation, in other words, post-incident, what was discovered. So on February the 9th of 2007, at approximately 1000 hours, the fire department prepared to conduct a live fire training evolution at this acquired structure. The training was required by the department as part of the requirements for the candidates getting to meet their NFPA 1001 level 1, as we mentioned already. So the scenario was to provide the recruits with a realistic first alarm response to a working structure fire that they might encounter within the city, and that would include 3 engines and 3 truck companies. There's a lot of these types of buildings in the Northeast, and I guess in Baltimore also. Last time I was there, I certainly saw quite a few. The victim's crew, which was the first due engine, was to make entry into the front of the structure. So that would be on the alpha side ground floor. They were then to bypass any fire on the second floor and proceed directly to the 3rd floor. So I guess that means bypass any fire on the 1st floor also, and to extinguish the fire on the 3rd floor. The second due engine was then to make entry through the rear of the structure and to proceed to the 2nd floor and fight the fire there. Note that none of the training participants, including the instructors, reported having knowledge that a fire was to be set on the 1st floor also. So when I was reading this, it brought to my mind rather interesting tactics for a row house that you plan on making a front and rear entry into the building at the same time, essentially, with your first 2 crews. So this particular building was the end unit. So getting around to the rear was relatively easy. You just walk down the open side of the building and you're at the rear. But if this bit in a middle unit in a block-long row of townhouses, how are you going to do that? You're going to have to go in through a neighboring unit, in, through, out the back. So you need to make sure that you can do that, and it takes time, and you can got enough hose, right, to get yourself there. So there was interesting tactics. I don't know if it's their standard or not.
Or an engine goes up the alley, which is very common, is they send an engine to the front, another engine in the back, and then they go in from both ends. Although, if you look at the LODD history, this tactic of opening the front and the rear of the building at the same time can have implications on the fire conditions inside the building. The
As
Back
we
Bay
shall see.
fire, the San Francisco fire, there's been so many.
Yeah. So there was no walkthrough of the structure prior to the fires being set, and no explanation of the structure's layout was provided to the recruits prior to the training evolution. Engine 3 was to assemble their gear at the front of the structure and was to act as a rapid intervention crew, the RIC. They had an instructor to supervise that crew, but that instructor was on light duties and not physically able to participate. So essentially, if the RIC had to go in to rescue somebody, they weren't going to have their guide with them. So just recruits going in. Truck 1 was to place ground ladders against the front of the structure, the alpha side, and then enter to conduct search and rescue. Truck 2 was to operate from the rear of the building to provide forcible entry and ventilation. Truck 3 was assigned to access the adjacent roof, which would have been on the Bravo side, via its aerial ladder and to provide vertical ventilation to the acquired structure. So you would have had 2 roofs as choice, right? You would have had the roof on the second floor in the back, or the roof on the third floor in the front. Anyway, at approximately 11:35 hours, the fires on all 3 levels. How many fires was that? Was it 10 fires, Paul? Was
Nine or 10
9 or 9, a lot. Plus all the opportunistic fires in the walls.
in the walls with the
We're
Excelsior. Yeah.
right. The fires on all 3 levels were ignited to begin the training exercise. Keep in mind, they didn't know there was a fire on the first floor. Somebody decided to set that fire. Approximately 4 minutes later, a simulated box alarm was given to dispatch the recruits to begin suppression activities. The Engine 1 crew, which was led by an adjunct instructor, rushed inside the structure in an attempt to make it as far as they could before the line was charged. It was reported that the engine used to supply water during the training evolution had a broken throttle controller on the pump panel. In other words, the pump operator could not control the engine throttle from the pump panel, so he couldn't adjust the pressure. Instead, a stick was used to hold the accelerator pedal down to keep the engine speed up, thereby holding water pressure steady.
Wow.
This is from the report. It's not my
We used to do that for
interpretation.
cruise control. When I was demoing fire trucks, we'd use that for cruise control, a stick.
Yeah. Modern diesels, when you hold the gas pedal in one spot, they don't stay at that speed. They wander all over the place. Anyway, the victim was on the nozzle. She was followed by the adjunct instructor. They made it to the top of the stairs at the second floor. So in other words, they made it up the first to second floor stairs, which it's up, there's a turn, and then they go up again. They made it to the top of the stairs at the second floor before the line was charged. Another student was just behind the victim on the stairs also. The other 2 recruits were at the bottom of the stairs flaking out the hand line. Well, not flaking it once it's charged, they would be jacking it. The heat and fire overhead on the second floor landing forced the Engine 1 crew to halt and to take a knee, which prompted the adjunct instructor to knock down the fire and not pass it up as he was instructed to do. They're supposed to go right by the second floor and go straight on up to the third floor. The stairs are continuous. They just keep going. Sorry, Paul?
It got too hot, so they had to knock it down a bit.
Yeah. There was too much fire on the second floor to walk by it. Anyway, the instructor told the victim to open up the nozzle in order to subdue the fire conditions on the second floor so that they could then proceed to the third floor as the training scenario had stated. The victim opened the nozzle and was struggling to control the hose line and then shut it down. She opened it again, and the force of the water knocked her back from her kneeling position onto the floor. The instructor then took the nozzle from her and fought the fire to a point where he felt comfortable with proceeding to the third floor.
The adjunct instructor believed that Engine 2 was right behind his crew. Engine 2 was to extinguish the fire on the second floor. The victim and her instructor proceeded up the stairs to the third floor, and they encountered moderate heat conditions that intensified as they continued up the stairs. Weird. You're going higher and it's getting hotter. That's almost like science. Yep. Even I remember that from science. On the third floor, the instructor and the victim did not see any fire in the front room. They just saw grayish smoke. The victim started to flow water as her instructor called for more hose. Another student, the backup firefighter, was positioned at the turn in the stairs between the second and third floor in order to flake the line around the corner. The third firefighter on the line was on the stairs going down to the second floor, and the fourth firefighter was flaking hose around the corner at the second floor landing. Engine 2 and Truck 2 were operating at the rear of the structure. Truck 2 made forcible entry into the rear door on the first floor and opened the window adjacent to the door. When they entered, the door frame was on fire with smoke and flames rolling out overhead. There was extensive fire in their rear room on the first floor. Just after the fires were extinguished, Engine 2 realized they didn't have enough hose to reach the rear of the structure. They added 3 more 50-foot sections of hose, which, along with the unknown fire on the first floor, delayed their entry. At this time, approximately 11:43 hours, or 8 minutes after the fires had been ignited, Truck 2 positioned an extension ladder to the Charlie side window on the second floor and vented it. Fire immediately blew from the window. Engine 2 had to operate for an estimated 5 to 7 minutes, extinguishing the fire on the first floor before they could proceed to the second floor for extinguishment. Truck 3 began operating a saw to open a ventilation hole in the roof above the front room of the third floor. Conditions on the stairwells between the second and third floors deteriorated due to fire drawing air and venting up the stairwell, which was acting like a chimney for heat and flames from the fires on the first and second floors. Heat and flames from the rear area of the second floor were also extending directly into the stairwell area. This was likely due to the ceiling having been pulled down in the bedroom during previous training exercises, and of the fire entering the attic area under the second floor roof. The heat and flames exited this area through the voids in the wall on the stairwell and just below the window on the third floor landing.
So you had a real structure fire. It wasn't a contents fire. It's a structure fire.
Exactly.
The Engine 1 backup firefighter attempted to seek shelter up the stairs behind the victim and the instructor. The instructor called for more line, and the backup firefighter had to reach through the flames to attempt to pull the hose around the corner of the stairs. The intense smoke and fire venting up the stairwell from the second floor was banking down within a couple of feet of the stairs, greatly reducing visibility. The backup firefighter was forced up the stairs and was beginning to receive burns to her legs, and her turnout coat was on fire. The Engine 1 adjunct instructor felt a rush of intense heat and knew something was wrong. He did not have a radio to make contact with the officer in charge, nor did he know of any alternative means of exit because they had not completed a walkthrough or any pre-burn briefing prior to the training evolution. He leaned out the window on the third floor landing to assess the situation and possibly make contact with someone. The backup firefighter came up the stairs and stated that she needed to exit because the conditions on the stairs were too intense. The adjunct instructor exited through the window onto the second floor roof and assisted the backup firefighter out the window.
So that's the Charlie side they're talking about.
Yeah, onto that second
The victim
floor roof.
also, sorry. Yeah. The victim also attempted to exit through the window, but was severely impeded due to the height of the windowsill and possible obstructions. The other two recruits on Engine 1 were now on the landing between the second and third floors. The hose line was not advancing, and they felt a rush of air go over them, followed by heavy fire. They made their way to the bend of the stairs and saw the victim, who was alone, attempting to exit through the window. The victim was attempting to climb out of the window and screamed for them to retreat as the intense flames were venting out the same window around her. The two recruits went back down the stairs and were faced with extensive fire. The recruits stated that they didn't know what to think about the victim being stuck in the window. They didn't know if it was part of the training, and they didn't have any way nor anyone to ask. They decided it would be best to fight the fire instead of just leaving the building. They pulled the nozzle down from the third floor and started to fight the fire on the second floor, where they met Engine 2. The two recruits from Engine 1 fought fire in the second floor closet towards the rear of the structure. The Engine 2 crew continued to fight the fire in the front of the second floor for another couple of minutes when the Engine 2 adjunct instructor heard screaming from the third floor. The adjunct instructor from Engine 1 had immediately returned to the window after helping the second firefighter on the line exit. The victim was at the window screaming for him to get her out of there. He reached in and grabbed her by her SCBA harness. He got her upper body out the window, but could not pull her lower body through. He was pleading with her to help, but she couldn't. He began yelling for help for anyone who could hear. He lost his grip and she slipped back inside the window. He reached back in to get her, and her mask and helmet were off to one side, exposing her face.
There's a note here. It was uncertain why the victim's mask became partially dislodged. It was reported that the victim had several incidents during her training at the academy where she had experienced mask claustrophobia and would panic and remove her mask prematurely. However, she could have removed it in an attempt to articulate to the other recruits to retreat, or it could have also become dislodged from being caught on the windowsill or a nail protruding from the windowsill, because they found nails protruding from some of the windows that's in the pictures.
The victim's mask was now free-flowing air. She was screaming for help to get out of the building while attempting to exit through the window. The Engine 1 adjunct instructor was yelling for help to the crew he could now see at the roof's edge above him. She again slipped back inside the window. This time, the Engine 1 adjunct instructor was assisted by a member of Truck 3. The victim was lifeless and they had difficulty lifting her through the window. 2 other members from Truck 3 came to assist. The adjunct instructor from Engine 2 had run up the stairs after hearing some screaming. He could see the victim's body partially out of the window. As he got closer, he could see the adjunct instructor from Engine 1 attempting to pull the victim out of the window. The victim's head and shoulders were out of the window. The adjunct instructor from Engine 2 reached down and lifted her legs up to a horizontal position, and she was immediately pulled out of the window. The adjunct instructor from Engine 2 went back down the stairs to get his crew from Engine 2 and knock down the extensive fire on the 3rd floor. Members from Truck 3 on the 2nd floor roof initiated life-saving support. She was quickly removed from the roof and transported to a shock trauma center where she was pronounced dead.
So, when you listen to this, you think, you're right at a window. Why can't you get out? But this window was over 3 feet off the ground. She was obviously a smaller person. It was only 2 foot 3 inches wide, something like that. I don't remember the exact detail, but it's only that wide. Do you remember years ago, Paul, there was a firefighter in a narrow hallway at a window who died trying to escape from a building that was on fire, and it showed all the difficulty the RIT team had. There was a guy inside trying to boost him out, and guys outside, and they couldn't get him out.
They made a drill about it, the Denver drill.
That's correct. That's where I was going to say, thanks, Doug. That's where that drill comes from. It comes from a real life incident where, similar to this, where the victim could not get out the window, and everybody says, well, why not? But unless you've tried it yourself, it's difficult. And I doubt that this person was extremely tall, probably a little over 5 feet. And, so you only got a couple feet of yourself. You're in an environment where essentially you're panicking, and very difficult to get yourself up and out, particularly if you don't have a lot of physical strength, which this recruit may not have had.
If the window's narrow, you can't get your elbows in there. You
Yeah.
can't get your elbows out to support yourself.
Yeah, very, very difficult.
Well, and you have a tank on your back. Like you're a wide. You're not just wide, but you're deep too.
Yeah.
As a person.
Yeah. And it sounds like her hips or that area got stuck getting through, right? So she may have been as wide or wider than the window at that point and would have needed to maneuver a different way to get through.
What's the name of the fellow from Winnipeg that bailed out the 2nd floor of the house? Lionel Crowther? Yeah, and I remember when he presented, they had just done that survival training course recently, the IAFF, Firefighter Survival, and he couldn't get out the window. It was a sash window with a middle divider mullion, and he threw the captain or whatever, the other fellow, out the window, and then he was trying to get out, and he kept getting caught on his tank, and he thought back and he remembered that training, calm down, think about it, obviously, and he loosened his BA straps to allow the tank to slide over, in line with his head and his shoulder.
Tuck it under your arm.
So he was able to get the tank moved enough that he could get through that window. Obviously, this person didn't have that training, so she didn't know to loosen her tank. It may have been part of the impedance in the narrow window as well. So all these things, when we talk about them on the podcast so that you remember them, the Denver drill or the IAFF survival training course, loosen your SCBA straps so your tank can go sideways on your back so you can get your head through and then the top of the tank bottle through.
And one,
I do want to mention an attaboy to the other 2 recruits that were on Engine 1 or whatever, that when they went back down the stairs, instead of just running, they picked up the nozzle or dragged the nozzle down and tried to make the conditions better without an instructor telling them to do that. So that's good on them to at least try to make the problem a little bit better.
Yeah, at any time
other than just running outside, which is probably what they were told to do by the people at the top. Get out.
Get out. But fight the fire, right? Any kind of fighting the fire makes conditions better. You need to do that.
Yeah. No, that was a particularly good thing
So
Part of the strategy too for RIT, right, is to take a saw and cut a window, make a door out of it, right?
yep,
So this is partially where that comes from, also.
exactly.
It doesn't matter how many strategies you have for RIT if your RIT team doesn't get told they're needed because you didn't bring a radio with you to call a mayday when something
Because
went
there's not
wrong,
enough
which I'm
radios.
sure will come up in these recommendations. But it was screaming at me as I was reading that, like, nobody here knows what the hell anybody's doing.
Correct.
They're all just operating
Going to the
independently.
third floor without a radio. Yeah, ahead of the fire. Yep.
Yeah, we will certainly hear more about that.
The cause of death, the autopsy report listed that the victim's cause of death was thermal injuries and asphyxia. The injuries, Engine 1 adjunct instructor received first and second degree burns to the back of his neck, ears, and wrists. He also received third degree burns to his fingers. The Engine 1 backup firefighter received second degree burns to her calves. She also received first degree burns to her right arm from her shoulder to the elbow. The recommendations. Recommendation number 1, fire departments should conduct live fire training exercises in accordance with the most recent edition of NFPA 1403, which is the standard for live fire training evolutions. Follow the standard. That's why it's there. It's the minimum standard.
Well, actually, that's not why the standard's there. The standard's there because people died in training.
Exactly.
That's why they wrote the standard.
Yeah, how to do it safely. Take the instructor course, the 1403 live fire instructor course offered by the International Association of Fire Service Instructors. Discussion. Fire department policy and Maryland state law require compliance with 1403, the standard for live fire training evolutions. It is imperative that fire departments develop or follow the programs as they have in place to ensure compliance with NFPA 1403. At this incident, specific examples of non-compliance with 1403 include, but are not limited to, lack of incident command, lack of personnel accountability, lack of incident safety officer, inadequate preparation of the structure for live fire training, insufficient water supply, the absence of a method of fireground communication among the officer in charge and firefighters, holes in walls, ceilings, and floors that were not patched, the number of training fires set, the locations of the training fires, instructors that did not have the recommended qualifications, absence of a pre-burn briefing and walkthrough, and extensive fuel loads. What more can you say? This was meant to happen the way they did it.
Yeah, you almost got the impression that the guys who decided where and what to burn were saying, well, let's get this place hopping, then they'll really know what it's all about.
Yeah, and that can happen. I've seen that happen where, we're going to prove it. We can make this thing really hot, and we're going to make these guys work, and they got to feel real heat, and a little carried away.
Recommendation 2, fire departments should ensure that all training and education, including live fire training, is conducted under the direct supervision of a qualified instructor or instructors who meet the requirements of NSPA 1041, which is the standard for fire service instructor professional qualifications. So this is the standards at the time. I haven't checked to see if they've been updated since then. So when conducting live fire training evolutions, NFPA 1403, which is the standard for live fire training evolutions that we just said, clearly outlines the requirements for the instructors. There should be a lead instructor. He's in charge, basically the officer in charge, that is ultimately responsible for conducting the live fire training and for ensuring that there is compliance with 1403. The lead instructor and all adjunct instructors, assistant instructors, and the safety officer should meet the requirements of NFPA 1041, which is the professional standards. When conducting live fire training for recruits in acquired structures, this event becomes a low frequency, high risk event. You're in an unknown environment. It's not like the burn building at the training academy. It's not like that at all.
Our friend Gordon Graham, low frequency, high risk.
Yeah, often has a bad outcome. Anyway, to ensure for a safe outcome, the personnel assigned to manage this training must be properly trained and certified to provide the instruction. Fire departments should encourage and provide the means for members to continue their education and training for possible promotions to positions of increased responsibility. Shouldn't be your first rodeo.
I do kind of, I don't know if sympathize is the right word, but I can understand why it happened that adjunct instructors weren't 1041 qualified, because they're guys from the floor that just go for the 3 months or whatever. And I can get in big fire department like this one, like, you can't train everybody to be 1041, so it makes it hard to make it happen that the adjuncts of the
It's
day
30
are
hours,
1041
30-hour
trained.
course or whatever. I mean, it's 1 week.
Okay, Paul, you're the fire chief. You go convince council to pay 30 hours for 1,000 people that aren't on a fire truck today.
Yeah, obviously the
Not gonna
department was
happen.
hurting. That's why they didn't have instructors, right?
Yeah. Well, if you have 1,000 officers, that's a pretty big department. You should be able to afford to train them properly.
But these weren't officers. They're just firefighters from the floor that are there adjuncting.
And the outcome was?
All I'm saying is I understand why they're not 1041. Yeah. And I don't know if they all need to be. I think the lead guy needs to be, and he has to run a tight ship. But I mean, 1041 doesn't tell you not to burn like these guys burned. Common sense tells you that.
Not that common.
Anyways, that's my 2 cents on that. Recommendation number 3. Fire department should provide the training academy and the safety division with adequate resources, personnel, and equipment. Several problems identified during the NIOSH investigation were related to the inadequate resources devoted to the division of training. This included the condemned burn building at the academy, the shortage of state certified instructors, inadequate staffing, inadequate and outdated PPE, faulty apparatus, a shortage of radios. A safety officer who meets the requirements of NFPA 1521 should oversee all operations at a training academy for adherence to safety guidelines set forth by the fire department and national consensus standards.
That's why we have these consensus standards that are minimum best practice. We must follow them. If you don't follow them, bad stuff happens.
Just to go to Doug's point about not every adjunct instructor can be fully qualified to 1041. These adjunct instructors who were part of this particular exercise hadn't even been in the building, didn't know anything about the building, didn't know anything about exit paths. That's one of the main things in live fire training is how do you get out? Didn't know anything about where the fires were set. Didn't even in some cases have radios. So they were not only not certified, they didn't even have awareness level of the things to look for and to the hazards. They just treated it like, I guess they'd rolled up cold on a real fire. They just treated it like that. And most of the time you get away with it, but not all the time.
I don't know how much like not being 1041 really mattered. I think using a bad building and using bad trucks and not having radios and using bad equipment and making too big of a fire, all that stuff was the problem.
Yeah.
A simple walkthrough at least, and patching the holes so the structure didn't catch fire while we're using it as a training building. Those are and communications. Those are the 3 big things for me. And you don't need to be certified to anything to know those.
Yeah. The building was unoccupied for 10 years? It was condemned for 5 years before somebody got it in their head. This is a great place to do a training fire. So
maybe we should have done this podcast like 15 years ago before Paul was on a department that ran live fire training with instructors that weren't 1041, and they could have ran a 1041, and I could have got my 1041.
That's right. Yeah.
Not to saying that we would have done it differently, but we can see it now.
Yeah, for sure. I've been against buildings or training in acquired structures for a long time because of this.
I don't. Live fire training. Yes, I think other training is very valuable.
Absolutely.
Because you can't do forcible entry in a concrete and steel burn tower. You can't do going through the drywall. Like there's lots of stuff you can do in an acquired structure. Burning it is not something you should do in an acquired structure.
Exactly.
I remember an incident from about, I want to say 40 years ago where we had an acquired structure. And on a Saturday, they decided to get the building ready. So they cut ventilation holes and they loaded it up with combustibles and, had all this stuff ready. And then they were going to do the live training on Sunday morning, and a bunch of departments were going to be invited. They were going to come and do it. But they had a party Saturday night, and a few members maybe got their judgment impaired and decided it'd be much more realistic if we had the fire tonight instead of tomorrow morning. So they went and lit the building up, and it was a 3-story building. And so we basically spent that night and the rest of the next day basically fighting a real fire.
Yeah,
So
watching it burn down.
yeah,
Well, we had one too. We were doing like acquired structure, like live fire S700 course, and we put extra drywall in like the burn area and kind of made it a little as beefed up as we could. And I remember we were taking our lunch break and we're standing there eating pizza, and me and like two of the chiefs kind of look over and we're like, I think the attic's on
yeah.
fire, and it's not supposed to be.
Hey Doug, is that
So
building on
our
fire?
our live fire training became a live fire real quick. And then I remember we had that house in Lacombe that the college gave us, Paul. And they were good about it. They said, do whatever you want, just don't put holes in the exterior. Don't put holes in the roof, blah, blah, blah. So we didn't do any of that. But we had some props inside the building that because we were there lots. And then one day they just decided to knock the building down with all of our props inside.
That's right. We did a bunch of
I guess we don't have
I
props
remember
anymore.
training in the
Yeah.
basement and dragging people out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, planning.
Recommendation number 4. Fire departments should screen recruits to ensure they meet physical performance requirements as established by the fire department prior to entering a training program to become a firefighter. Fire departments should develop criteria such as the Candidate Physical Ability Test Program, CPAT, which is widely recognized and backed up, verified by science, as described in the Fire Service Joint Labor Management Wellness Fitness Initiative, to ensure that recruits are physically able to safely and effectively complete the critical tasks associated with firefighting, such as the candidate's ability to operate with a sense deprivation, such as obscured visibility. The fire department involved in this incident did not have any physical fitness requirements. Recruits participated in a physical fitness training, but there were not any minimum performance requirements. I remember, doing physical fitness tests here, and just, in the dark with a BA, doing a search, not getting claustrophobic, not freaking out, finding your way around, lifting the rescue tool, carrying hose, climbing a ladder, real firefighting stuff. It wasn't CPAP, but at least it gave us a good baseline.
Call a spade here that, essentially a political agenda might have, been definitely involved in here in having this person get killed. And, that's unfortunate.
Especially if the person exhibited signs of sensory deprivation, panic problems, and stuff like that during training and drills in a safe environment. Well, then it's not the time then to take them into a dangerous environment.
Yeah. Previously, those would have washed you out.
Yeah.
Recommendation number 5. Fire departments should develop and maintain a comprehensive respiratory protection program, which complies with NFPA 1404, Standard for Fire Service Respiratory Protection Training. I believe that has changed now, but
might be a different number. They're all changing.
Yeah, it's a 15. I can't remember the number now because there's a whole bunch of stuff changing right now. Anyway, in Canada, there's different standards for respiratory protection. There are CSA standards. There's 2 of them, one for the air and the other one for the program itself. And these are not optional. If you kill a firefighter because you're not complying with these programs, you're essentially going to be hauled up on the carpet for that. And in this case, there was a lawsuit that came out of this, by the way. So firefighting is an extremely physically and psychologically demanding occupation that requires strength, physical agility, and physical endurance, as well as the ability to operate effectively within the limitations that from self-contained breathing apparatus, wearing the apparatus, and your other personal protective equipment. It's not the same as standing around in your street clothes. When you're all geared up, you're definitely impeded, which is why I used to see guys, training without their gloves on, and we would always have that discussion. If you can't do it without your gloves on, then you're no use on the fire ground because you're going to take your gloves off there too. So it's a problem. You can get better at it when you train effectively with all your gear. The fact that a firefighter may have a physical ability to perform functions such as hose advancement, well, here we're going to talk about that, and rescuing victims with their vision unobscured does not mean that the firefighter can perform any of these functions while wearing their required personal protective equipment such as their SCBA. Fire departments should recognize and implement SCBA best practices such as those described in the minimum requirements outlined in NFPA 1404, Standard for Fire Service Respiratory Protection Training, or the new number. Firefighter applicants should be screened even before hire, and which is what we used to do, for the ability to operate with sensory deprivation, such as phobias regarding sight obscuration and covered face issues. We used to also do acrophobia issues, height issues. Recruit firefighters that cannot successfully pass the SCBA portion of recruit school due to a medical or a psychological issue that causes them to panic or not perform should not be allowed to progress further in the recruit training process until they can either overcome their ability and reliably use the SCBA or they're gone. In my opinion, it's too high a risk for them, let alone the people they work with, let alone the public, to continue. Uh, I know we do mostly medical calls now, or 50% medical calls, and there's lots of firefighters that are wonderful at that and really enjoy it. Doesn't require necessarily a lot of physical strength, but it does even just to carry a patient.
But you got to be able to do the job. You got to be able to perform to take care of yourself
Yeah,
and your
yeah,
your
yeah,
fellow workers.
yeah. The job is firefighter.
Yeah, the department involved in this incident.
Yeah, I mean, we said this already. They didn't have a physical fitness requirement. They've participated in physical training, but there weren't any minimum performance requirements. It's critical to diagnose things like mask phobia and provide treatment prior to a recruit becoming a firefighter, which I agree with. I was on fire departments that we tried to institute pre-job testing, and like on day one, people wanted to have, well, they have to do SCBA stuff. And I always would say, well, they might not know anything about an SCBA. They need some training
Mm-hmm.
on it before they're tested on it, right? Like you might be scared the first time you put it on, but you need to allow a recruit to get comfortable with it. And it might not be a problem going forward.
This recommendation applies to recruit firefighters. It says right here in the beginning, it says fire departments should ensure all recruits meet these requirements. And I would say that basically all active firefighters. I mean, I've known firefighters who were 20 years into their career and they couldn't wear a BA anymore. They were not physically fit enough to survive the event of wearing a BA and being a firefighter. So that's a problem. And it's a problem all through your career. You need to maintain that physical capability. You need to maintain that capability to wear your protective gear, your SCB, and to do the job. If you allow that to slip, if you fall out of that ability, then you become a hazard.
Basically, yep. No, you're right. Recommendation 7: fire departments should implement inspection criteria to ensure that all protective ensembles meet the requirements of NFPA 1851, was the standard at the time for care, selection, maintenance of structural firefighting protective ensemble. And this was new then. We started looking at gear and how old it was and stuff like that, and how to maintain it. So this was just coming on stream in these times. The 10-year rule, I remember, was a big challenge for a lot of departments. The maintenance of protective gear, specific requirements for the retirement of gear. Fire departments should develop specific criteria consistent with manufacturer recommendation for the removal of protective gear and clothing from service. In the latest edition, August of 2007 of 1851, they recommended the retirement for all gear at 10 years from the date of manufacturing, regardless of the level of use. The fire department in question sent their old turnout gear that was removed from service to the training academy to be used by recruits.
But nowadays, you should have your gear professionally cleaned and inspected at least annually,
Yeah,
and
and
by a certified agency. Not the guy that fixes the tires on your car, but by a guy who's certified to do this, and they will tell you whether that gear continues to meet NFPA. There's the standard now includes all kinds of tests, and observations visibly and stuff, and they will condemn your gear. And as you'll see here, the practice, and it's a practice in many departments of passing that on to the training division,
but not that and the new
is an
standards
issue.
came in the teens, 2011, 2014, somewhere in there, to have it inspected every year by a qualified agency and stuff like that, which many departments are doing. But if your department's not doing that, that's definitely something you need to be getting done. There's agencies all across North America that will do that for you at a nominal fee, clean the gear, inspect the gear, and give you a certificate that it's good to go, or take it out of service. Which,
Yeah,
if
I've
it's
seen
not,
gear come back from those. I've seen gear come back from those inspections. Look great on the outside, look great on the inside, and when they disassembled it, there was
yeah,
so much damage between the layers that it wasn't going to protect the firefighter. And
Exactly.
your average firefighter, even though they're supposed to be doing visual inspections of their gear regularly themselves, user inspections, they would not have known that this gear was compromised like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, recommendation number 8, fire departments should ensure there's a coordinated communications between the instructor in charge and the live fire training participants. Sounds kind of obvious. Proper communication is critical to the safety of firefighters at any incident site, including training. Portable radios should be used to keep all personnel on the scene in communications with the instructor in charge. The instructor in charge is basically your IC. The fire department this fire department actually issues portable radios to all firefighters in the field, who are regularly assigned to
In
platoons.
service. Yeah.
In service. However, portable radios should also be issued to all recruits and instructors in training exercises as well. The radios should be designed and positioned, and we've had these discussions here before, to allow the firefighter to monitor and transmit a clear message. These radios should be well maintained and inspected by qualified personnel on a regular basis. All of the recruits and at least 2 instructors did not have portable radio during this live fire training because there reportedly weren't enough available. It's the training division gets all the cast-offs. Cast-off trucks, cast-off gear, cast-off radios.
Recommendation number 9. Fire departments should utilize the incident command system and a personnel accountability system for all incidents, including live fire training exercises, that meets the requirements of NFPA 1561, the Standard on Emergency Services Incident Management System. I completely agree. Training should be designed to reinforce the use of safe practices for situations that firefighters may encounter on the fire ground. Company or crew continuity relies on the following factors that are instrumental in developing safe firefighters: knowing who is in your company or crew and the officer or crew leader, staying within visual contact at all times. If you can't see each other, you have to remain within touch or voice distance of each other, communicating your needs and observations to the officer or crew leader, rotating to rehab and staging as a crew, and watching your company or crew members practicing strong buddy care approach. These key factors help to reduce serious injury or even death resulting from risks involved in firefighting operations and help to discourage freelancing. Companies or crews that enter hazardous environments together must leave together. And I agree that training should reinforce this in your brain so that you do it when you get to the real fires. You can't do training and real life different. Training needs to set you up for real life. That's the whole point of it.
It's walking before you can run, right? Go slowly through it. Recommendation 10, fire departments should create training atmosphere that is free from intimidation and conducive to learning. The purpose of training is to teach firefighters in a safe environment that supports learning and proper techniques to accomplish an assignment. Training exercise should not be used as pressure recruits to drop out. By fostering positive learning environment, fire departments can capitalize on individuals' analytical skills to become problem solvers within the team organization. And that's the real problem here, is the mixture between acceptance or being passing some sort of qualification and then training. And those lines can be blurred. Yes, you still got to pass your training to get on, but it shouldn't be the point where we're trying to weed you out.
You're supposed to train for success. I mean, training's not supposed to be punitive. It shouldn't carry the extra stress of, wow, I got one chance to get this right, and if I don't, I'm gone. It shouldn't be like that. It's supposed to be supportive. You're supposed to train for success. You give people the opportunity and you give them the support they need to learn the skills, to develop their mask confidence, to develop their gear confidence, to develop their crew confidence, to develop their communications confidence, their line handling confidence, all of these things, ladder confidence, all these things that are challenging to a person off the street walking onto the job, that you don't have that ability to work together automatically, and for your partners to have complete and absolute trust in you and your ability to do your job and your ability to support them and to support them if they get into trouble. All of that needs to be learned. All of that needs to be practiced. Like Doug says, you got to practice it like it's real. But you take slow steps, you walk it through, you do dry runs, you do advancing the lines, you do all these things. And I'm sure they did quite a lot of that stuff before they got to the live fire. But clearly there were people involved in this live fire that under the conditions that were there would have challenged even experienced firefighters. You had fire on every level, fire in every corner, and an opened up building like an abandoned building, which, as we've talked on this podcast about, abandoned buildings should be no-go zones for firefighters. And
Yeah.
so essentially you've decided to cite a fire in this. So why would you expose your recruits to that type of an environment on their basically, it sounded a lot like their first real live fire drill because they needed to be signed off on that. What you were doing is rolling the dice. They'll survive this and talk about it for the rest of their life, or they won't survive it and be off the job or injured or whatever the case may be. So that to me is a non-success. You should never design your training that way. You should be training for success. And if somebody can't do the job, then for their own safety and the safety of everybody around them, they need to be sidelined and either cycle back through or just be told that live firefighting is not for them. I get off a soapbox now.
Well, but the whole point of training and live fire is exactly what you just said. There should be a method that if a person's having an issue with part of the training, you can sideline them safely. And that's what didn't exist in this building. If somebody was having a problem with a piece of equipment, was probably having a problem with the technique, there was no safe zone for them to be pulled aside to go, hey, let's try that again. There was none. You're going to die if you don't get out of this building.
Yeah. But in this one, if we pay attention to the narrative, they got to the second floor, and the victim, the firefighter, the cadet, was on the nozzle, and the firefighter's backup person wasn't behind them.
No,
was
that's right.
Down the stairs at the landing.
Yep.
So when the firefighter opened the nozzle, it put her on her ass. She couldn't control it.
And who knows
she
what
couldn't
the
control it
pressure
on
was.
Right. Couldn't control it on her own. And that's a problem. As a firefighter, you have to be able to control an 1 3/4 line on your own.
But we don't know what the pressure was. It may have been high because the pump operator was operating the throttle with a stick.
Agreed. But there are techniques to mitigate that.
There are, but those are more
You have to learn them.
Yeah, you got to learn them.
Better not to learn them when the whole world is on fire around you.
Exactly. Yep.
Anyway, recommendation 11. States should develop a permitting procedure for live fire training to be conducted at acquired structures, and also ensure that all the requirements of NFPA 1403 have been met before issuing the permit. Discussion on that. I'm not sure I agree with that, but that's okay. So the standard of 1403 is the standard for conducting live fire training evolutions at approved training centers, and as in this case, at acquired structures. So both, right? So even though you're at the training academy in your certified burn building, 1403 still applies. You can still get hurt there. And we've talked about other things, that other incidents where that's happened. Anyway, structures that are acquired for live fire training are usually in disrepair. This one certainly was. Never designed for live training. This one certainly wasn't. Any building that is acquired for live fire training must go through an inspection process to identify and eliminate any hazards. Didn't happen here. Or potential hazards that may be present to participants, the public, or the environment. No evidence that was even thought of. An application for permit procedure that is overseen by the state through local officials or state representatives would help to ensure safety. If training facilities with approved burn buildings are available, then live fire training exercises should not be conducted in acquired structures. As mentioned, the department had a burn building on the grounds of the Fire Training Academy, but it was condemned. It wasn't safe to use. The department also had a mobile live fire training simulator at the academy that was not being used due to limitations of its size and limitations on its safety features. So even their training trailer wasn't safe to use, so they decided not to use it. And they couldn't get all the recruits through it. So are you going to get the state to come and certify every training situation? I think that's an unreasonable thing to do. But certainly, as a fire service, you should be able to self-regulate. I mean, you're the one that's going to carry the can if you do it wrong. I mean, this is a management thing. Management should be both feet on the ground when it comes to live fire training. There should be alarm bells going off and saying, have we built a program? Have we built procedures? Do I have people that are capable? They should be thinking all of these things through before they say anything about, yes, go ahead. I see you have your co-pilot, Doug.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
How's Dante today?
Good.
In the appendix here, the NIST, National Institute for Science and Technology, has conducted heat release rate experiments on A-frame or TP pallet arrangements that were shown in this incident. The Excelsior was used as the initial fuel to ignite the pallets. The Excelsior used was in bales that were approximately 18 by 14 by 36 inches. Each bale of Excelsior weighed approximately 60 pounds. Half a bale was used with each set of 3 pallets. The baled Excelsior was pulled apart to fill the interior space formed by the pallets. At this incident, 3 lean-to fires could be considered as equaling 1 A-frame fire in the NIST experiments. Taking account all of the stage training fires in the incident, the training fires equaled approximately 4 A-frame fires, suggesting a heat release rate of 8,000 kilowatts. With the additional fire load in the rear room on the first floor, the exposed wood framing members, the insulation, the added bales of Excelsior, it can be estimated that the total heat release rate for the structure was in excess of 10,000 kilowatts, which is a lot.
Crazy, man.
Yeah, with unknown whether flashover occurred at the training exercise, based on the ventilation limits of a residential room with a single open doorway, the minimum amount of energy needed to occur induce flashover is about 2,000 kilowatts. Plus, we had the wind. They don't even talk about the wind.
Back door was open, front door was open, first floor back window was open, second floor back window was open. There was a lot of ventilation into this building.
There was.
And a direct consequence that helped to cause the death of the firefighter was the ceilings on the second floor on the Charlie side in the back, the walls were pulled and the ceiling was open, and the drywall, or it would have been lath and plaster probably, on the side of the stairwell in the center, that was gone too. So the window that the firefighter died in was directly above all of this.
They're actually fortunate that the roof on the second floor roof, which they exited onto from the window, didn't become involved and everybody fall into the building. They're actually fortunate because that attic was burning inside there. It said there that there was fire in the attic between the two floors.
Yeah. So. It could have been a multiple LODD at this incident.
So
because those instructors, they weren't going anywhere. They were going to stay and get their recruits out. And because their recruits now had become victims, except for, like Doug says, those 2 recruits that says, hell no, we ain't going. We're fighting this fire.
Putting the fire out. We're firefighters. We got a hose. We got water. Yep. They pulled the hose down from the 3rd floor. Yep.
Yeah. Which is the right attitude, but also could have been dangerous because we don't know what level of experience they had at fighting real fire. We don't know.
Yeah. Because their instructor had gone upstairs to help get the person out the window.
Yeah. So they were on their own. You know, there were consequences of this fire, and the consequences go beyond the firefighter who lost her life in this. And I was having a look at Firefighter Close Calls, which is an excellent website. You should be in the habit of going there. It's particularly if you instruct or if you're an officer, it's really good lessons learned, although it'll make you cry at sometimes. It really will. And it's frustrating at times too. But the city where this happened is basically settled for a $200,000 settlement with the family. And this person that died this woman, she had 2 children, so who were left without a mother. And this building was vacant at the time, right? So really was a building nobody had any, real business being in when it was on fire. And so the firefighter who died, her name was Rachel Wilson. She was 29-year-old, and they had originally sought like a $10 million lawsuit. So they settled anyways, which is quite a lot lower than was asked for. But an independent investigation found that the training exercise in which Wilson was fatally injured had violated something like 50 national safety standards. So we listed some of them earlier. So this is coming from Firefighter Close Calls. And there were several high-ranking Baltimore fire officials who lost their jobs over this incident or in the fallout over this. So as officers and, with responsibility, and chief officers, don't think that you can not pay attention to this stuff. You absolutely have to. It affects the entire department.
And in 2021, I believe it was, Baltimore lost 3 other firefighters at a working fire in a vacant structure, which, again,
we covered that.
Yeah, we covered it in a couple episodes a couple of years ago. Same fire department. So Baltimore, unfortunately, has had a lot of issues with line of duty deaths. So
Yeah.
hopefully keep
But they
learning. I
have
listen.
they have
Sorry,
a lot of dangerous structures too.
they
It's
do. They do.
the city core is old. It's there are socioeconomic issues. The maintenance of some of these buildings. The streets are narrow. They get winter there. So there's a lot of challenges. And I
There
don't
was
know that the fire department adequately staffed or funded. Really,
Yeah,
don't
and
know.
in the 2021 episode, a lot of the problems arose from command training and use of incident command. And actually, since then, even before the report came out, they began doing incident command training. And I can say from personal experience, I listened to the command when the ship hit the bridge in Baltimore, and their incident command usage on the radio was exemplary. It was textbook. So they've obviously
Yeah,
learned from some of these mistakes. And so hopefully they
yeah,
continue moving forward, and they've learned from this one, and they're learning
yeah,
from others. So
yeah. It's a bitter way to learn.
thank you again for listening to another episode of Emergency Traffic. We hope that you find these informative and insightful. Please feel free to see the photos and drawings of this incident on our socials, and you may leave a comment or a like on your listening app. Let's be safe out there.
Take care every day.